If you ever want to understand what real horror looks like in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, forget demons, forget tyrannids, forget even the mind-breaking nightmares of the warp. Nothing compares to watching a human being, someone with memories, fears, and a heartbeat, mutate into a chaos spawn. And today, you're going to experience it as closely as any sane person ever should. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because the transformation I'm about to describe doesn't just happen in the dark corners of the galaxy. It begins like an infection, slow at first, then unstoppable. Imagine walking into a building that feels abandoned, only to find that it's alive. Imagine hearing a voice that sounds mostly human, but not quite. Imagine seeing a person's face melt into something that tries to scream, but no longer remembers how. This is the fate that awaited Sergeant Ralston and his unit on Vardos 7. Ordinary soldiers who expected a routine sweep, and instead found themselves standing at the threshold of damnation. As you listen, stay with me to the end, because the horror isn't only in the transformation itself. It's in the realization that chaos doesn't always arrive roaring out of the warp. Sometimes it begins with a whisper asking for help. Sometimes it begins with a single breath. And sometimes by the time anyone notices, it's already too late. The manufactorum on Vardos 7 had been silent for weeks. Ever since the first Vox reports mentioned strange lights flickering inside the derelict structure. Most guardsmen dismissed it as old machinery sparking to life, but Ralston wasn't convinced. When his boots crossed the threshold, the air felt wrong, heavy, humid, unnaturally warm despite the dust-frozen environment. Breaking glass and collapsed rafters should have echoed beneath every step, but instead each sound died instantly, swallowed by an oppressive stillness that felt almost anticipatory. Private Kelrin walked close behind, his hands trembling not from fear but from instinct. Soldiers know when they're being watched. Ralston scanned the overhead gantries, their rust-choked chains barely shifting. "Sir," Kelrin whispered. "This place was reported clear," Ralston answered without looking back. Chaos doesn't leave things clear. The deeper they moved inside, the more the sense of being enclosed intensified. Not trapped by walls, but watched by something that wanted them to continue. Broken servitors stood frozen in their alcoves, faces twisted in mechanical grimaces that somehow felt expressive, as though each metal husk tried to warn them. The faint scent of burned oil mingled with something biological, something that made Ralston's throat tighten. And then they saw it. A perfect circular scorch in the middle of the floor, too symmetrical to be natural, too deliberate to be accidental. At its center lay a guardsman, his body partially fused to the metal plating, armor melted and skin blistered. At first they thought he was dead. Then his chest moved. Ralston rushed forward, weapon raised. He knelt beside the man, scanning the visible wounds. The skin had split along the arms, not from external force but from internal strain, as if the body itself resisted something growing inside it. "Trooper, identify yourself," Ralston ordered. The man's eyelids burst open, revealing pupils dilated far beyond normal limits, so wide that only a faint ring of color remained. His breath came in sharp, panicked gasps that didn't match his stillness. "Help me!" His voice cracked, as though the sound had been forced through a throat that no longer understood speech. Kelrin stepped closer, pulling a stim injector from his belt. "Sir, he needs medical attention." The trooper's arm lashed upward with impossible force, seizing Kelrin's wrist. The bone snapped audibly. Kelrin's scream echoed through the manufactorum, a raw sound swallowed quickly by the still air. Ralston shoved Kelrin back and aimed at the wounded man, but hesitation froze him. He'd seen corrupted soldiers before, but this felt different. The wounded man convulsed violently, veins bulging across his skin, some rupturing with soft pops. His jaw unhinged slightly, then more, distorting his face into a grotesque silhouette of agony. "Emperor, forgive me," Ralston whispered, because he finally understood. They were not dealing with an injured man. They were witnessing a metamorphosis. The transformation began with horrifying speed. The trooper's jaw tore downward, splitting the flesh along the cheeks until the mouth resembled a gaping wound rather than a human expression. His teeth liquefied, dissolving into a pale, gelatinous sludge that dripped onto the scorched floor. New rows of jagged fangs erupted immediately from bleeding gums, crooked, uneven, as if his body no longer received precise instructions but still desperately tried to assemble something with which to bite. His left arm bubbled with pulsating knots beneath the skin before splitting open, revealing fibrous muscle twisting into the shape of a hooked talon. His right arm dissolved entirely into a rope-like appendage that thrashed against the ground. Kelrin scrambled backward with one arm dangling uselessly, tears streaming down his face as he begged Ralston to shoot. But the sergeant hesitated again, captivated for a moment by the sheer wrongness of what he was seeing. The smell thickened, copper, incense, and something like rotting fruit mixed together. Chaos corruption advancing at a rate that defied biology. The troopers' screams turned into overlapping voices, some shrill, others deep, until the sounds no longer matched any natural vocal pattern. His spine cracked, loudly as new limbs burst from the torso in unpredictable directions. Eyeballs sprouted across his chest, blinking wetly and fixing on both guardsmen with childlike curiosity. The creature that had once been a man trembled violently, then let out a shriek so discordant that even the broken servitors seemed to recoil. Warp contamination, Ralston murmured, finally accepting the truth. "Kelrin, get out now!" But escape was already impossible. The newly formed chaos spawn surged forward, not walking or running, but lurching in a skittering mess of limbs that obeyed no rhythm. Its mass expanded with every movement as though absorbing energy from its surroundings. Kelrin, clutching his shattered arm, crawled toward the exit, his breath sharp and panicked. "Sir, help me." The spawn overtook him in seconds. A maw split open across its abdomen, an orifice of writhing muscle lined with spiraled teeth. It clamped onto Kelrin's torso, dragging him upward with a strength that shattered armor plates like pottery. Kelrin screamed again, but the sound abruptly cut as the maw enveloped him. The spawn convulsed, its skin rippling as Kelrin's body dissolved within its expanding mass. Ralston fired repeatedly, each last bolt searing holes into the creature's shifting form. But the wounds closed instantly, skin folding and reknitting like liquid wax. The spawn turned toward Ralston, raising an amalgamated limb dripping with melted armor fragments. With a violent strike, it knocked the laser gun from his hands, sending it clattering across the floor. Ralston drew his combat blade on instinct, knowing it offered no real chance of survival, but unwilling to die without resistance. The creature loomed over him, its many eyes blinking asynchronously, each one wet with a mixture of mucus and dark ichor. It released a sequence of sounds, half sobs, half gurgles, as though fragments of the original troopers. Consciousness still cycled within the abomination. The horror wasn't just its shape, it was the faint traces of humanity that pulsed beneath the corruption. Ralston forced himself to charge, slamming the blade into the exposed cavity beneath the creature's twisting limbs. The spawn convulsed violently, its body enveloping the blade arm with layers of tightening muscle. A spray of corrosive bile hissed across Ralston's armor, burning through the surface and filling his visor with the stench of metal decay. He staggered back, only to see the creature recoil as if wounded, not physically but emotionally. Its eyes rotated, focusing on him with an expression disturbingly close to pleading. Then the voices came, not spoken aloud but vibrating in the air around him, echoing from every direction. "Kill me." The tone fluctuated, as though multiple speakers attempted to express the same dying thought through different vocal patterns. Ralston gritted his teeth and drove the blade deeper. The spawn let out a horrid mixture of a sob and a roar, collapsing into a quivering mass of tendrils that writhed uncontrollably. The floor vibrated beneath Ralston's boots as the creature's internal structure began to unravel. Its limbs retracted or melted into puddles, eyes dissolving into gelatin that steamed upon contact with the cold metal. A final shudder rippled through its body, and then it collapsed into a heap of viscous, shuddering tissue. The silence returned, but it was not a restful silence. It was the quiet of something watching from deeper within the warp, waiting for new flesh to twist and claim. Ralston stood alone, armor corroded, body trembling, and stared at the pile of steaming biomass that had once been two of his soldiers. His mind struggled to process what he had witnessed. Chaos did not change people, it erased them. He activated his Vox link with shaking fingers. "Command, this is Recon Unit Gamma," he said, voice cracking. "We have warp contamination." Chaos activity confirmed. Static filled the line. Then a distant voice responded, distorted and crackling.
"Gamma, specify contamination."
"Type." Ralston looked at the mass on the ground, a twitching, steaming conglomerate of flesh still shifting slightly, as if the transformation tried to restart even after death. "Spawn-level corruption," he said slowly. "Recommend immediate purge protocols." But as he spoke, a deep dread settled into his bones. The manufactorum was too quiet, too clean, too staged. This mutation wasn't random. It was intentional, placed for them to find. His voice steadied, growing colder. "Negative. Recommend orbital cleansing." He ended the transmission, then turned toward the exit, forcing his limbs to move before something else inside the building awakened. But leaving did not bring relief. Outside, the sky over Vardo 7 churned with unnatural colors, twisting clouds that pulsed faintly like veins. Ralston's realization hit with sickening clarity. The trooper had been the beginning, not the end. Something had seeped through the veil long before the recon unit arrived, slowly infecting the world around them. Kelrin's screams, the trooper's final plea, the spawn's dissonant voices, they were symptoms of a much larger catastrophe. And Ralston knew that whatever happened next, he wouldn't be alive to see it resolved. He was contaminated, even if physically unmarked. The warp touched everything it encountered. Ralston walked toward the extraction point with the discipline of a soldier. But inside, dread gnawed at him. Every step felt heavier than the last. His thoughts distorted, colors around him intensifying in unnatural ways. Greens too vibrant, shadows too deep, metal structures bending at their edges like they were breathing. He shook the hallucinations away, blaming shock. But the warp does not release minds once it enters them. His vox crackled again. "Gamma, your life signs are unstable. Are you injured?" Ralston didn't answer right away. He tried to form a coherent response. But images of the spawn flashed across his vision. Its eyes, its plea, its dissolving skin. "I'm compromised," he finally said, voice strained. The word felt heavier than admission. It felt like a confession. As he continued walking, he noticed something on the ground. Footprints. Not his, not Kelrin's, not the trooper's, multiple sets. Bare, human, leading toward the manufactorum, then vanishing into the dust as though erased by an unseen hand. Ralston stared at them with rising horror. Those footsteps were fresh. Something else had entered the building before them, maybe minutes earlier. Something that didn't leave. His hands trembled. Warp entities did not always reveal themselves. Some lingered unseen, manipulating events quietly. The conversion of the trooper might not have been accidental contamination. It might have been a demonstration. A lure. Ralston felt suddenly exposed, as though 1,000 eyes pressed against his mind, searching for cracks. He forced himself forward. Extraction was close, but the world shimmered again. At the landing zone, the extraction shuttle hovered, ramp open, engines glowing. 2 medics approached, scanning him. "Sergeant, stand still. Your vitals are spiking." Ralston tried to respond, but his thoughts tangled, words slipping between his fingers. One medic reached for him but pulled back sharply. "Sir, you're emitting warp radiation." The phrase froze the entire crew. Ralston's heart hammered. "I'm not corrupted," he muttered, but even he didn't believe it. The captain of the shuttle stepped forward. "Sergeant, you may have been compromised at the mental level. Until evaluated by the Inquisition, you cannot board." The declaration hit harder than any weapon could. Stranded, condemned, alone. Ralston felt the weight of the war zone around him, the silence, the distortions, the wrongness. He pictured the trooper begging for help. He pictured Kelrin being swallowed alive, and for a moment he wondered if he would share their fate. But Ralston was still a soldier, a guardsman. He steadied himself. "Get off world," he ordered. "Tell command they need exterminatus protocols ready." The captain hesitated. "Sergeant, go!" Ralston roared with the force of a dying world. The ramp closed. Engines roared. The shuttle lifted, leaving him alone on the ash-coated plains as the sky flickered unnaturally. Ralston turned toward the horizon, gripping his combat knife as the first whispers curled at the edges of his hearing. If you made it to the end, comment for the Emperor. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so others can witness the terrifying truth of chaos corruption.